There is a quiet frustration that many people carry but rarely name. It appears when you have studied, practiced, visualized, prayed, tried to align your thoughts and emotions, and yet life seems to respond with delay, resistance, or silence. Outwardly, everything looks normal, but inwardly there is a subtle feeling of being out of sync, as if something essential is missing between intention and reality. This video is an invitation to look honestly at that space, not with judgment, but with depth and clarity. For a long time, manifestation has been presented as a matter of technique, the right words, the right visualization, the right routine. But beneath all techniques exists a more decisive layer, one that is rarely addressed directly. Manifestation is not blocked by a lack of desire or effort. It is blocked when your inner state, your emotional history, and your sense of identity are not aligned with what you are asking life to bring forward. In other words, the obstacle is often invisible because it lives inside what feels familiar, automatic, and unquestioned. Many people sense this intuitively. They feel tired of forcing optimism, repeating affirmations that do not resonate, or blaming themselves for not believing enough. What is rarely said is that the nervous system remembers experiences the mind tries to override: fear, disappointment, unprocessed grief, and old survival patterns can quietly contradict even the most sincere intentions. When that happens, life does not respond to what you want, but to what you are prepared to sustain. In this journey, we will slow down. We will move away from performance and toward coherence. Instead of chasing results, we will explore the inner conditions that allow change to become natural rather than exhausting. This is not about fixing yourself because you are not broken. It is about understanding what is silently shaping your reality and learning how to realign step by step, with a state where manifestation no longer feels like a struggle, but like a response. The invisible block that shapes your reality. There is a subtle moment in life when a person begins to sense that effort alone is no longer the problem. You may still be moving, still trying, still hoping, yet something inside feels restrained, as if an unseen hand were gently but firmly holding you back. This sensation is rarely dramatic. It does not arrive as a crisis. Instead, it settles quietly into daily life, showing up as hesitation, emotional fatigue, or the feeling that every step forward requires more energy than it should. This is often where the invisible block lives, not in failure, but in the tension between wanting change and unconsciously resisting it. What makes this block so difficult to recognize is that it does not feel like resistance. It feels like normality. It feels like caution, responsibility, realism, or even maturity. Over time, these qualities become part of how you describe yourself. You may say you are careful, grounded, logical, or simply realistic about life. Yet beneath these descriptions, there may be an emotional memory that learned long ago that expansion comes with risk, disappointment, or loss. When that memory is active, the body does not move toward growth with openness. It contracts even while the mind is asking for more. Many people misunderstand manifestation because they focus exclusively on thought. They assume that if the desire is clear and repeated often enough, reality must follow. But the body is not persuaded by repetition alone. The body responds to safety. It responds to what feels familiar and survivable. If your past taught you that wanting leads to frustration, or that visibility leads to criticism, or that success leads to pressure you could not manage, then a part of you learned to associate expansion with danger. That association does not disappear just because you decide to want something different. This is where the idea of alignment becomes meaningful beyond words. Alignment is not positive thinking. It is not forcing belief. It is the state where your desire, your emotional readiness, and your sense of identity are moving in the same direction. When they are not, life feels like friction. Opportunities appear, but you hesitate. Doors open, but you feel unprepared. You may even sabotage progress without understanding why, then blame yourself for lacking discipline or faith. Often, the invisible block is rooted in identity rather than intention. You may consciously desire abundance, love, peace, or purpose, but unconsciously still see yourself as someone who must struggle, adapt, or wait. Identity forms slowly, through repeated emotional experiences. It is shaped by how you were treated, what you learned to expect, and what you had to become in order to feel safe. Once formed, identity acts like a filter. It does not ask what you want now. It asks what version of reality feels consistent with who you believe you are. This is why certain patterns repeat even when circumstances change. A new opportunity arrives, but the same doubt follows. A new relationship begins, but the same fear of loss appears. A financial improvement occurs, but the same anxiety around stability remains. These repetitions are not punishments, they are signals. They reveal that the inner structure has not yet updated to match the outer possibility. Another aspect of the invisible block is emotional incompletion. Many people carry unresolved feelings they learned to suppress in order to function. Grief that was never processed, anger that was never expressed safely, disappointment that was never acknowledged. These emotions do not vanish. They settle into the nervous system and influence perception. When life offers something new, the system checks not only the present moment, but the emotional history attached to similar experiences. If the memory carries pain, the system hesitates, even if the mind insists it wants to move forward. This hesitation is not weakness. It is intelligence shaped by experience. The problem arises when this intelligence is outdated. What once protected you may now limit you, yet because it operates quietly, it feels like truth rather than habit. You may think, this is just how life works, or this is just who I am. In reality, it may simply be who you had to be in order to cope. The concept of the invisible block invites a different relationship with yourself. Instead of asking why manifestation is not working, the question becomes more subtle. What part of me does not yet feel safe receiving this? What internal agreement am I still honoring without realizing it? These questions are not meant to create blame. They are meant to create awareness. Awareness loosens what force cannot. When awareness deepens, something shifts. You begin to notice moments where you pull back emotionally, where you minimize your desires, where you postpone commitment to what matters. These moments are not failures. They are points of contact with the block itself. Each time you notice them without judgment, you reduce their power. The invisible becomes visible, and what is visible can be integrated rather than fought. Manifestation, in this sense, is not about commanding reality. It is about becoming internally available for a different experience. Availability is a state of openness grounded in stability. It emerges when the body feels regulated, when emotions are acknowledged, and when identity expands to include the possibility of ease rather than struggle. This does not happen overnight. It unfolds through small shifts in perception, through gentler self-observation, and through a growing willingness to stay present with discomfort instead of escaping it. What matters is not that you identify the block perfectly, but that you recognize its existence with compassion. The invisible block is not an enemy. It is a signal from a system that learned to survive under different conditions. When you approach it with curiosity instead of force, you begin to create the internal conditions where alignment becomes possible and where reality can respond not to effort alone, but to coherence. When desire meets fear in the nervous system, desire is often described as a bright force, something that lifts the mind and opens the imagination. Yet, for many people, desire does not arrive alone. It brings a shadow with it, not because the desire is wrong, but because the nervous system remembers what desire has cost in the past. Sometimes it cost disappointment, sometimes it cost rejection, sometimes it cost humiliation, pressure, or the painful realization that hoping too much can make the fall feel sharper. When that memory exists, even silently, desire can trigger fear the way thunder triggers a child's body to brace before the sound fully lands. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in manifestation. People assume that fear means they are not aligned, not spiritual enough, not disciplined enough, not worthy enough. But fear is not a moral failure. Fear is a physiological response designed to protect you. The nervous system does not evaluate your dreams based on inspiration. It evaluates based on perceived safety. It asks a simple question in a language deeper than thought. Is this experience survivable? If the answer is uncertain, the body prepares for threat, even when the conscious mind is speaking about abundance, love, and peace. This is why someone can visualize a new life and still feel heavy. It is why affirmations can sound empty when repeated from a place of tension. It is why a person can know what they want and still delay the very steps that would allow it. The nervous system does not respond to words as much as it responds to state. If the state is contraction, the body sends signals that influence perception, attention, and behavior. In that state, the mind may interpret reality as more difficult than it is, not because life is objectively harder, but because the inner system is scanning for danger. The body's relationship with the future is not philosophical, it is sensory. The future is experienced as anticipation in the chest, tightness in the stomach, tension in the jaw, fatigue behind the eyes. These sensations are not random. They are often the residue of past experiences that taught your system to associate expansion with instability. If you grew up in an environment where peace was unpredictable, you may unconsciously equate calm with the moment before something goes wrong. If you learn that recognition attracts criticism, you may hesitate when life offers visibility. If you learned that money creates conflict, you may feel guilt or anxiety when income increases. None of this is irrational. It is patterned. This is where the language of frequency becomes more meaningful when translated into lived experience. Frequency is not merely a spiritual concept. It can be understood as the emotional and physiological tone you carry through the day. A regulated system tends to perceive options and feel capable of responding. A dysregulated system tends to perceive threats and feel compelled to control. When people say they feel stuck, many times they are describing a nervous system that has become conditioned to a narrow range of emotional states. It is not that the universe refuses to respond, it is that the inner system keeps returning to the same baseline, and that baseline shapes choices, relationships, and opportunities. The challenge is that the mind often tries to solve this with force. It tries to override fear with intensity, as if louder belief could silence the body's memory. But intensity often increases tension. It turns manifestation into a struggle, and struggle becomes its own identity. The person begins to feel that growth must be hard, that transformation must be exhausting, that receiving must be earned through emotional labor. In that story, even good things arrive with a hidden tax, the feeling that peace is not allowed unless it is purchased with effort. A more accurate understanding is that fear is not opposed to desire, it is attached to it. It is the protective part of the same system that wants something new. Desire points toward expansion, fear points toward the cost of expansion, real or imagined. When fear is ignored, it does not disappear. It influences from the background, shaping decisions through avoidance, perfectionism, people-pleasing, procrastination, or constant overthinking. When fear is met with shame, it becomes stronger. Shame tells the nervous system that its protective response is unacceptable, which increases inner conflict and deepens the need for control. In many lives, control becomes the disguised form of fear. Control can look like planning everything, monitoring outcomes, obsessing over signs, comparing timelines, or constantly seeking reassurance. The person feels they are being responsible, but internally they are attempting to guarantee safety. The irony is that the more control they seek, the less life feels alive. The present becomes a hallway between anxiety and expectation. Manifestation then becomes a negotiation with uncertainty, rather than a relationship with possibility. There is also another layer that is rarely spoken about: grief. Not only grief for what was lost, but grief for what never happened. The grief of not being chosen, the grief of being misunderstood, the grief of realizing years have passed without the life you imagined. Many people carry this quietly, and because it is painful, they rush past it. They replace it with motivation, with new goals, with new techniques. But unprocessed grief makes the nervous system cautious. It whispers, "Do not hope too much. Hope has hurt you before." When that whisper is present, desire becomes fragile. It can feel risky to commit emotionally to a new reality. This chapter is not about turning fear into an enemy or treating the nervous system like a problem. It is about recognizing that the body is always participating in manifestation, whether you acknowledge it or not. Your emotions are not a separate department. They are a central voice in what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you sustain. The universe, in a practical sense, responds through the pathways of your attention and behavior. If your system is constantly bracing, it will move through life in a way that confirms bracing. If your system becomes steadier, it will begin to notice and choose differently, not because of magical thinking, but because stability changes perception. Desire does not need to be louder. It needs to be integrated. When desire and fear are no longer at war inside you, the inner signal becomes cleaner. You begin to feel a quiet steadiness replacing urgency. And in that steadiness, a new kind of movement becomes possible, one that does not depend on forcing outcomes, but on becoming internally available for what you have been asking for. Identity, time, and the quiet resistance to change. Change is often imagined as an event, a breakthrough moment when everything finally shifts. In lived experience, however, change is more often a slow reorganization of identity. It happens when the way you see yourself no longer matches the way you have been living. This mismatch can feel uncomfortable, even disorienting, because identity is not just a set of beliefs. It is a sense of continuity, a story that helps the nervous system predict what comes next. When manifestation appears to stall, it is frequently because the future you desire does not yet fit inside the identity you have learned to inhabit. Identity forms through repetition. It grows out of what you had to do to belong, to survive, to be accepted, or to stay safe. Over time, these adaptations become invisible. They no longer feel like strategies. They feel like personality. You may see yourself as the responsible one, the one who holds things together, the one who does not ask for too much. Or perhaps you see yourself as the one who always has to struggle, the one who figures things out alone, the one who expects disappointment and prepares for it in advance. None of these identities are wrong. They were solutions at some point, but solutions can become limitations when the context changes. One of the quiet resistances to manifestation comes from loyalty to an old self. That self carried you through difficult seasons. It learned how to endure, how to adapt, how to minimize pain. When a new possibility appears, a part of you may hesitate not because you doubt the possibility, but because accepting it feels like abandoning who you were. This can create a subtle inner conflict. On the surface, you want growth. Beneath the surface, you feel a responsibility to remain consistent with your past. The nervous system often chooses consistency over expansion because consistency feels safer than the unknown. Time plays a crucial role in this dynamic. There is chronological time measured by years and milestones, and there is psychological time measured by emotional readiness. You can be 30, 40, or 50 years old and still be carrying emotional patterns formed decades earlier. When life presents an opportunity that belongs to a more mature or expanded version of you, the body may respond as if it is still living in an earlier chapter. This is not immaturity. It is unresolved timing. Parts of you are still waiting for something to complete, something to be acknowledged, something to make sense. This is why people sometimes feel they are late to their own lives. They look around and feel behind, even if they have achieved a great deal. That feeling is not always about external comparison. It is often about an internal sense that time moved forward, but something inside did not. When this gap exists, manifestation feels strained. You may feel pressure to catch up, to make things happen quickly, to compress years of longing into a short period of effort. That pressure creates urgency, and urgency tightens the system. What you want begins to feel heavy instead of expansive. Another aspect of identity-related resistance is the relationship with ease. Many people learned, implicitly or explicitly, that ease is suspicious. They associate ease with laziness, vulnerability, or loss of control. If life was unpredictable, ease may have felt like the moment before chaos. If love was conditional, ease may have felt undeserved. As a result, the system becomes accustomed to effort as proof of worth. Struggle becomes familiar, even comforting. In that context, manifestation that promises flow and alignment can feel abstract or unrealistic, not because it is impossible, but because it does not match the internal narrative. This narrative often operates quietly through language. Phrases like, "This is just how it is," "Nothing comes easy," or "I should not expect too much," may sound reasonable, even wise. Yet they also reinforce an identity anchored in limitation. The mind may call this realism, but the body experiences it as constraint. When you carry this identity, opportunities that require receptivity rather than effort can feel confusing. You may not know how to relate to them. You may unconsciously delay, complicate, or downplay what arrives simply because it does not fit the familiar pattern of striving. The concept of time also shows up in how people relate to patience. Patience is often misunderstood as waiting passively. In reality, patience is an internal regulation that allows change to unfold without forcing. When patience is absent, it is often because time has been associated with loss. The system feels that waiting means missing out, being left behind, or wasting life. This creates a sense of urgency that undermines alignment. The person may jump between desires, methods, or identities, trying to outrun the discomfort of not knowing when things will shift. At a deeper level, the resistance to change is not about the future itself. It is about what the future asks you to let go of. A new reality often requires releasing familiar pain, and that can be surprisingly difficult. Familiar pain is predictable. It gives structure to identity. When that pain dissolves, there can be a sense of emptiness before something new takes its place. Many people avoid this in-between space. They hold on to what hurts because it gives them a sense of self. This is why transformation can feel like loss before it feels like gain. You are not only moving toward something new, you are also loosening your grip on who you have been. When this process is not acknowledged, the system resists subtly. It creates distractions, doubts, or fatigue. It tells you that now is not the right time, that you need more preparation, more certainty, more proof. These messages are not lies. They are expressions of a system trying to protect continuity. The key insight is gentle but profound. Manifestation is not only about attracting what you desire, it is about becoming someone who can live with it comfortably. Identity must expand at the same pace as possibility. When time is honored internally, when the past is integrated rather than rejected, resistance softens. Change stops feeling like betrayal of the old self and starts feeling like a natural evolution. And in that state, the future no longer feels rushed or delayed. It feels available. Alignment is a state of coherence, not control. There comes a moment in many inner journeys when a person realizes that effort alone is no longer producing clarity. The more they try to organize life from the outside, the more fragmented they feel inside. This is often when the concept of alignment begins to change meaning. Alignment stops being about managing outcomes and starts revealing itself as a state of coherence, a subtle agreement between thought, emotion, body, and perception. When this agreement is absent, life feels noisy. When it is present, life feels quieter. Even when circumstances are challenging, control is frequently mistaken for alignment. Control promises safety through prediction. It suggests that if every variable is accounted for, uncertainty will disappear. But uncertainty is not a flaw in life. It is a fundamental condition of growth. When a person tries to manifest through control, they remain in a state of vigilance. They monitor signs, timelines, reactions, and results. The nervous system stays alert, scanning for confirmation or threat. In this state, even positive changes can feel stressful because they introduce new variables that must be managed. Coherence, by contrast, does not attempt to eliminate uncertainty. It creates internal stability that allows uncertainty to exist without overwhelming the system. This stability does not come from knowing what will happen next. It comes from trusting one's capacity to respond. When coherence is present, the body feels grounded, the breath deepens naturally, and attention becomes less scattered. This state is often described as being in flow, but flow is not something that is forced. It emerges when internal signals are no longer in conflict. Many people unknowingly live in a state of internal contradiction. They speak about peace while living in urgency. They talk about trust while constantly anticipating disappointment. They value authenticity while suppressing their own emotional truth. These contradictions are not signs of failure. They are signs of adaptation. At some point, these adaptations helped maintain stability. Over time, however, they create tension. The system expends energy holding opposing states simultaneously. This tension is exhausting, and exhaustion is often misinterpreted as lack of motivation or inspiration. Alignment, in its deeper sense, is the release of unnecessary inner opposition. It is not about eliminating fear, doubt, or discomfort. It is about allowing these experiences to exist without letting them dictate every response. When alignment is present, emotions move through rather than stagnate. Thoughts arise without becoming absolute truths. The body becomes a place of information rather than alarm. In this state, action feels cleaner. Decisions feel less reactive and more intentional, even when they are simple. One of the reasons alignment is misunderstood is because it is subtle. It does not announce itself with dramatic emotion. Often, it feels ordinary. There is a sense of quiet confidence, not because everything is certain, but because there is less internal resistance. Life does not suddenly become perfect. Instead, the person becomes less divided. And when division decreases, energy previously used for inner conflict becomes available for presence, creativity, and responsiveness. The idea of the field, whether described as the universe, life, or reality itself, becomes more tangible in this context. The field responds through pathways of perception and behavior. When coherence is present, perception widens. You notice nuances, timing, and connections that were previously filtered out by stress or urgency. Opportunities do not necessarily appear more frequently, but they are recognized more clearly. Choices feel less forced because the internal signal is steadier. Control, on the other hand, narrows perception. It focuses attention on what could go wrong, what must be fixed, what must be secured. In that narrowed state, even supportive circumstances can be interpreted as insufficient or temporary. This creates a cycle where the person keeps pushing, adjusting, and correcting, never quite arriving. Manifestation becomes a project rather than a relationship. Another important aspect of coherence is the relationship with the body. The body is often treated as something to be managed or ignored in spiritual conversations, yet the body is where alignment is felt most clearly. It registers congruence and incongruence before the mind can articulate them. A sense of ease in the chest, a grounded feeling in the lower body, a natural rhythm in breathing. These are not mystical signs. They are indicators of regulation. When these indicators are present, the system is more capable of sustaining change without collapse. In many cases, people attempt to align their lives without first acknowledging how dysregulated they have been living. Chronic stress, emotional suppression, and constant mental activity create a baseline that feels normal but is far from balanced. When someone tries to manifest from this baseline, they often oscillate between hope and exhaustion. Alignment then feels like another task, another standard to meet. True coherence does not add pressure, it reduces it. The relationship between alignment and action is also frequently misunderstood. Alignment does not eliminate action, it refines it. Actions taken from coherence tend to be fewer, clearer, and more consistent. Actions taken from control tend to be scattered, reactive, and draining. The difference is not moral, it is physiological and emotional. A regulated system can wait, choose, and adapt. A dysregulated system feels compelled to act immediately, often without clarity. As coherence deepens, a subtle shift occurs in how time is experienced. Urgency softens. The future feels less like a threat and more like an unfolding process. This does not mean passivity. It means that effort is no longer fueled by fear of falling behind. Instead, effort becomes an expression of engagement with the present. In this state, manifestation stops feeling like something that must be chased. It begins to feel like something that responds. Power is not the ability to control outcomes. It is the capacity to remain internally organized in the face of uncertainty. When that capacity is present, alignment is no longer something to achieve. It is something that emerges naturally from coherence. And from that coherence, life begins to reflect back a different quality of experience. Not because reality has been commanded, but because the inner signal has become clear. As this journey comes to a close, what remains is not a formula, a promise, or a guarantee. What remains is understanding. Understanding that manifestation is not blocked by a lack of desire, intelligence, or spiritual effort, but often by an inner structure that learned to survive under different conditions. When that structure is not seen, it quietly directs life from behind the scenes. When it is seen with honesty and compassion, something begins to soften. Throughout this reflection, one theme has returned again and again: coherence, not perfection, not constant positivity. Coherence, the quiet agreement between who you are, what you feel, and what you are ready to sustain. When that agreement is missing, life feels heavy, repetitive, and delayed. When it begins to form even subtly, experience changes texture. There is less force, less urgency, and more clarity, not because problems disappear, but because you are no longer divided inside while facing them. The invisible block was never an enemy. It was a message, a signal from a system that adapted to pain, uncertainty, or loss, and did its best to keep you safe. Growth does not require destroying that system. It requires updating it. That update happens through awareness, presence, and a willingness to let your identity evolve without betrayal of your past. You are not asked to abandon who you were. You are invited to include more of who you can become. When alignment is understood as coherence rather than control, manifestation stops being a struggle against life and becomes a conversation with it. A conversation shaped by how you listen, how you respond, and how honestly you inhabit yourself. In that space, change no longer feels like pressure. It feels like permission. And perhaps the most important realization is this: nothing meaningful needs to be rushed. The moment you stop fighting your own inner timing, life begins to move in ways that feel quieter, steadier, and more real. Not because everything is finally right, but because you are finally present enough to meet what arrives. Before you leave, pause for a moment and consider this question. If your life were responding perfectly to your inner state, what would it be showing you right now about what you are ready to receive? If this reflection resonated with you, subscribe to the channel to stay connected to deeper conversations like this one. Continue watching on the final screen and allow this journey to unfold further, one layer at a time.